back to CEBL Weekly, your once-a-week journey around the Canadian Elite Basketball League. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. Thanks so much for being here once again. We got a loaded show for you today, and usually in this spot, I'll take some time to monologue a little bit about what's got my interest in the league over the last 7 days. But today, we're going to just draw that monologue out to the entire show, more or less, because the thing I'm really fascinated in right now in the CEBL are the playoff races, the positioning, the seeding jockeying. It's all really compelling right now. There's still tons left to play for. Nothing's been decided when it comes to buys and who's going to be playing in the quarters and the play-ins. It's fascinating stuff, and so on today's show, we'll talk a little bit about how these teams are arranging themselves in the power rankings, as we usually do. Plus, we'll take a look at the updated playoff picture and examine the games down the stretch that you need to be watching that will determine who ends up where in the final regular season standings. We got all that, plus a look at the top 10 dunks of the year and our weekly calendar check and game of the week coming up on today's show. Time now for the Power Rankings, and this week it's Power Rankings with a twist featuring 100% more props. I'll explain that in just a second, but let's begin with number 10 in this week's ranking, the Newfoundland Growlers. Sadly, the Growlers became the first team to get eliminated from playoff contention over the weekend. It's tough to sugarcoat things for a team that's 2-13 at the time of recording, but I'm going to try my darndest anyway. This team has been deserving of a better record all year long. They've had enough close losses that it's easy to see them with 5 or 6 wins and a puncher's chance at making a play-in spot right now. Above all, it's been a treat to watch pro ball in St. John's, featuring players with NBA pedigree like Brandon Sampson and Canadian stars like Javon Blair and Junior Cadogan. It hasn't gone super well on the court in year one for the Growlers, but everything else has been fantastic in the Newfoundland experience, and I'm really eager to see what comes up in year number 2 for Newfoundland. At number 9, it's the Montreal Alliance, and it's must-win time for Montreal at this point if they want to make the postseason. At 4-11, the most wins they can end up with is 9, meaning they need one of Scarborough, Guelph, or Saskatchewan to stay stuck on 8 wins while the Alliance win out. It's a tall order, but the schedule is favorable to Montreal right now, at least. Their next 3 games come against the Newfoundland Growlers, who are, of course, in last place with just 2 wins, before closing against the Rattlers and the Blackjacks. The latter is already assured of a spot in the semifinals, so may not need to have their foot on the gas completely, and that game with the Rattlers on the 29th could, in theory, have huge tiebreaker implications if Montreal can take care of business against Newfoundland. It's probably too late for Montreal to realistically make it, but I'm saying there's a chance. At number 8, we have the Ottawa Blackjacks. It's now 3 straight losses for Ottawa after it seemed like they'd settled into a bit of a groove, though all 3 of those games were decided by single digits. A single possession in the case of their loss to Saskatchewan this past week. Thankfully for them and for Ottawa fans, they're the only team right now that can just chill, that doesn't need to worry about playoff seeding thanks to their championship weekend host status and their clean passage through to the semifinals. Which leads me to the next mess of teams. Buckle up. Now, I told you at the top of the segment that I have props, that I'm a man of my word, and there's very good reason for it this week. Teams 7 through 3 in this week's ranking, I have no idea how to determine the proper order. There's very little separating all these teams, and so I'm leaving it to the fates in the form of this deflated, concave, FIBA-approved basketball, which has been made into a little bowl from which I'm going to pull teams' names to assemble the rankings, meaning no one can get mad at me because it's the basketball gods who have decided this week's rankings and not me. Take it up with them. I'm sure they have Twitter DMs. All right, let's go with the first one. Number 7 in this week's rankings are the Scarborough Shooting Stars. And honestly, this kind of makes some sense. They lost a couple of games this week, including one where they were never really in it until deep in Elam-ending time against the Hamilton Honey Badgers on Thursday. They occupy number 7 this week, but again, there's lots of mobility here. All these teams are very much in the same range. Throw them out. We go to the next team. Number 6 is the Saskatchewan Rattlers. And look, this is a team I have been high on all season long, and they have Tony Carr, who is, for my money, one of the top 2 MVP candidates in the league right now. They're going to be dangerous no matter where they end up in the standings once we get to knockout time, but they did just lose 4 games in a row before ending that streak, so 6 does make some sense here despite their rock-solid talent at the top end of the roster. At number 5, it's the Guelph Nighthawks, who have bounced back nicely after losing a whole lot of games in a row. They've won 2 straight and look to be kind of rounding back into the form that we knew they could provide. They might get AJ Lawson back if he doesn't sign a contract with the Dallas Mavericks after Summer League. That would be a massive addition for a team that relies on Lawson's ability to run transition and scream down the wings for dunks and assists. That would be a big one as Guelph looks to continue their recent run of play with the 2 straight wins. They've been very streaky all season, though. They could continue this winning streak or lose 3 straight, and I would not be surprised based on what we've seen so far this year. In number 4, we have the Edmonton Stingers, who by rights should probably be number 3 this week on merit of beating the Hamilton Honey Badgers on Sunday on the road in Hamilton. This is a deep roster with championship pedigree. We know how good this Edmonton team can be, but for now, they're number 4 because the basketball gods have decided to smite them. And that means in 3rd, we have the Fraser Valley Bandits, who I think you could make a pretty good claim belong at number 3 right now. Despite losing some games recently, they did pick up a big win on Sunday where they got great performances from Thomas Kennedy with 27, Shane Gibson with 25, and James Karnick with 23. Karnick has been one of the best late-season additions for any team across the CEBL. Shane Gibson is kind of a sneaky stealth candidate for most outstanding player, and they have tons of talent up and down the roster. Merritt Clausen is back, Alex Campbell is still there, and of course Brandon Gilbeck, the defending Defensive Player of the Year, is on the team now too. This Fraser Valley team is not one I'd want to come across in a single knockout game. They are number 3 this week. And that retires the props once again as we move on to the top 2. In the 2 spot, we have the 2-time defending number 1 Hamilton Honey Badgers, who looked every bit the best team in the league on Thursday as they laid the smackdown on a previously red-hot Scarborough team at home. They followed that up, though, with a home loss to Edmonton to snap their 6-game winning streak. And with Summer League wrapped up, Christian Vital and Jeremiah Tillman Jr. should be back in the fold very, very shortly. However, watching how Ryan Schmidt manages having more talented players than can legally be dressed is one of the sneaky, interesting storylines of the final couple weeks for this week's number 2. And that brings us to number 1, the Niagara River Lions, and this team is a problem. After beating up on the Shooting Stars on Sunday for their 5th straight win, the River Lions are 12-4 and tied in the loss column for the all-important top spot and the bye through to the semis. It's likely they'll get the league's best shot blocker, EJ Onu, back from Summer League for the final 2 weeks, and it's getting ever more difficult to deny Khalil Ahmad's most outstanding player candidacy. He's nearly 2 points clear atop of the league's scoring race, but it's not just that he gets buckets, he creates buckets as well with his nearly 5 assists a game and his transition igniting 2 steals a night, both of which rank in the top 10 in the CEBL. At this point, I think it's between Ahmad and Tony Carr of the Rattlers, and I'll hear cases for Guelph's Cat Barber and Fraser Valley's Shane Gibson, but there's one argument in Ahmad's favor that the other leading contenders simply can't claim, and that's the win column. For now, the River Lions are number 1, and Khalil Ahmad just might be at the same spot in the MVP power rankings as well. My favorite thing about basketball, by a pretty substantial margin, is dunks. We have a segment now that really doesn't need any introduction because it should be your favorite thing too. Here are the top 10 dunks of the CEBL season so far.
Vino drives, and Vino goes up. Keith and Vino, the 2-hand jam in traffic. Canadian Elite Basketball League on CBC Gem, CEBL Plus, and
she wants her team to give her a W for the birthday tonight. Long way yet. Oh! Oh, yes! What a throwdown! to this one. Okafor with the steal. Joko with the throwdown, getting violent, and then he has some words to say for Pakara.
If they get by him, he knows he can follow. Okafor, you got me last time? Yeah, well, check this out.
Trying to put it through. Here's Cadogan. Cadogan to Sampson, and there's the way you put it away. Brandon Sampson gets the Newfoundland Growlers their first win of this CEBL season strong, and that's exactly what that young man just did.
I mean, what an exclamation point on an unbelievable night and a great start to the season for him. But this is all about the Growlers and their team game here tonight, and just how they locked it down. Locked it down. That was the phrase of the game. In their own zone.
38 years old. Jalen back out there. Jalen Harris. Oh! Two-handed flush from Jalen Harris. Right here.
Yeah. My goodness. Like I said, that first step of Jalen Harris.
With the big just to drive, not to shoot.
Dickerson. Marlon Johnson. Oh, pinpoint pass and the throwdown.
So when you move the basketball, everybody's responsibility is to be open to the ball. This is a great cut by Uguak. They just haven't got him a lot of shots the last couple of games.
And here comes the block. Uncontested jam. Okafor on the deck. Again, another good stop there and a denial from Edmonton. Here's Uguak again. Right-handed throwdown.
Here it starts on defense. Picard gets the rebound. And this Edmonton team runs with 5. Uguak, give me a layup, baby. Just give it to me right in front of his mom.
They just got to continue to play the game and limit the runs and try to make it hard for the Rattlers' top players.
Gray, wonderful, into the seams, and boy, he's going to get the harm as well. Kennedy and Kadre Gray with some nice chemistry early on in the season.
Kind of like swung open almost like a door when he got hit as opposed to if you're taking it.
Oh, wow. On the inbound, alley-oop and slammed home. A.J. Lawson. Guelph leads at 28-19. Guelph run. Make it 10 points for A.J. Lawson.
Just make them work on defense if you're a Fraser Valley Bandit.
Still looking for the first points of the third quarter. The alley and the oop, and it was nasty. TJ Lau.
James short on the triple. David Mooncat to the moon. Skies in for the two-handed putback. Let's take a look though at that putback jam by David Moon.
With just 2 weeks left in the CEBL season, the playoff picture is fascinating. Everything's to play for, from the buys up top, even the last play-in spot, which Montreal, with some luck, could maybe even squeak into if they can win out down the stretch of the schedule. In between, there's a whole mess of teams that we just covered in the power rankings that could finish anywhere between 3 and 7. It hurts my brain. Before we started this segment, we were looking at a spreadsheet with all the different tiebreaker scenarios, the remaining schedules, the head-to-head matchups, and it really, really befuddled me. So on today's show, we're going to try to simplify things a little bit for you and give you what you need to know about the standings and the playoff races heading into the final couple weeks of games. Here's a look at the CEBL standings as of Monday, July the 18th. So there may be a couple of games that get played that leave this a little bit out of date by the time this airs, but that doesn't matter because it's still going to be super close no matter what. The point is, all these teams could finish in a different spot than they currently occupy right now. Let's first give the lay of the land for the playoffs and how they're actually going to work. The 1 and 2 seeded teams are going to be advanced all the way through to semifinal weekend. They get clean passage, easy enough. The 3 and 4 seeded teams host quarterfinal games on August the 7th at their home arenas against the winners of the play-in games. Those will be played by seeds 5, 6, 7, and 8, with 5 hosting 8 and 6 hosting 7, the winner moving on to play on the road in the quarters. Where you have to sort of change the way your mind views these standings is with the Ottawa Blackjacks, who are currently number 8, but in our purposes, or for our purposes I should say, they are actually number 2 because they're the host city for championship weekend, meaning they get clean passage, so we'll slide them up to 2, bump Niagara down to 3 for the purposes of the playoff standings. So the first thing to really address now is the 1 seed bye, currently held by Hamilton at 13 and 4, but the River Lions are right there at 12 and 4 with one more game to play than Hamilton has. This is probably going to be decided by a home-and-home series on July 29th and 31st between Hamilton and Niagara, the first time these two teams will have played all season long, meaning we don't even know the tiebreaker and how it shakes out between these two teams. For reference, if a team has played just 2 games against another, its point differential over the course of the 2 games, that's the determining factor. If there were 3 games in the regular season series, the team that won the season series gets the tiebreaker advantage. So Niagara very much alive for number 1. So with Hamilton or Niagara getting one of the byes and then also hosting one of the quarterfinals, that leaves just one quarterfinal hosting gig left up for grabs. It seems as though Fraser Valley and Edmonton stand the best chance of getting it, although Scarborough is still on the same number of losses as those teams at the time of recording. Fraser Valley and Edmonton have a last game of the season against one another, and the tiebreaker there is juicy. They're 1-0 in the series in favor of Fraser Valley, meaning there won't be an uneven number of games to determine, and it will come down to point differential. Through their 1 game against one another, Fraser Valley holds the tiebreaker by a piddly 3 points, so it's all to play for, potentially, in that final game between Fraser Valley and Edmonton. Beneath that, we get into the play-in nexus, and that is all sorts of messy, complicated most by the fact that Guelph and Saskatchewan still have 2 games against one another over the course of their final 4. That could have huge implications as to tiebreakers and where these teams slot in between number 4 and number 7, or for our purposes, number 5 and number 8. It seems as though Edmonton's pretty in the clear to host a play-in game, but again, it's all separated by just a single loss between 3 and 7, so who really knows? Then all the way down there at number 9 are the Montreal Alliance, who, as we mentioned earlier in the show, stand a very low chance of making it in here, but there are a couple of pathways. Mostly, they gotta win out. But even if they just get to 8 wins and get one of those victories against Saskatchewan in their final game by more than 12 points, they will have the tiebreaker against the Rattlers, and so if the Rattlers end up losing out, it would actually be Montreal in that case with a record of 8-12 against Saskatchewan's 8-12 that would get into the postseason, knocking the Rattlers out of the mix. Does that make sense? I don't even know if it does, but hopefully this was a helpful look at the playoff race and how things shake out with just a couple of weeks left on the schedule. Now, in the spirit of the razor-close playoff races going on in the CEBL, this week's Game of the Week, the one game you simply got to watch over the next 7 days, features 2 teams very much caught up in the gooey middle of the CEBL standings. It's the Edmonton Stingers hosting the Guelph Nighthawks at the Expo Center in Edmonton on Saturday. That goes down at 12 Mountain Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time on CBC. It's a nationally televised game, so there's no reason for you not to watch it. And the tiebreaker implications in this one are massive. At the time of recording, these teams are separated by just 1 game, and Edmonton is 1-0 in the season series, but has just a +6 point differential, meaning if Guelph can win this game by 7 or more, they will have the tiebreaker over the Stingers going into the final week of the season. My head hurts, but boy oh boy do I love this play-in stuff because it leads to incredible matchups and huge implications on the line for a whole bunch of games we have left on the schedule. Now, with all of the implications still on the line for the postseason, I hope you're not just going to watch the game of the week and call it at that. You should be watching every game on the schedule this week. There's so much on the line. Let's take a look at what's on tap over the next 7 days. Things get rolling on Thursday in a massive battle between the Saskatchewan Rattlers and the Guelph Nighthawks out in Saskatoon. As it stands, both teams are 8-8 and have not played yet, so the tiebreaker is all to play for. They've got 2 games in the final 2 weeks of the season that will have huge impacts on how the standings turn out. Then, the Niagara River Lions continue their pursuit of the top seed in the bye to the semifinal. On Friday, as they take on the Scarborough Shooting Stars, who again are very much caught up in that morass. Also on Friday, to close out a doubleheader, the Montreal Alliance take on the Newfoundland Growlers in the first of 3 games as the Alliance look to save their season by winning out. On Saturday, it's the game of the week, Stingers hosting the Guelph Nighthawks on CBC. Then on Sunday, the Ottawa Blackjacks take on the Hamilton Honey Badgers, who can scantly afford to lose any games going into their final home against the River Lions, so they'll be sure to want to pick up that victory. That one goes down 2 p.m. on Sunday, and it's followed up by the second of the games between the Alliance and the Growlers. The triple header on Sunday closes out as the Scarborough Shooting Stars take on the Saskatchewan Rattlers in another game chock full of postseason meaning. And the week ends with a game between the River Lions and the Fraser Valley Bandits, which might not have the top seed implications we thought it might a couple weeks ago. It's still a possibility, I suppose, but this one will certainly have far-reaching ramifications for both the race for the top seed and for the quarterfinal hosting picture as well. That one goes down 7 p.m. at Meridian Center on Monday, and you'll hear me on the call for that one. By then, who the hell knows what the standings are going to look like? My brain hurts, but I hope this has been informative. And that will do it for this week's episode of the show / calculus lesson. Really appreciate you for being along for the ride. In case you missed it, CEBL Mobile, the official app of the CEBL, is now available for all iOS and Android devices. Download now and follow your favorite teams and players and watch every single game for free. Also, don't forget to follow us at CEB League on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for all the latest news, updates, and of course, clips of dunks. CEBL Championship Weekend is also headed to our nation's capital August 10th to 14th, and tournament packs are on sale now. Get your tickets at cebl.ca, which is the place you can go to for all of your other CEBL information. For Director Jamie Tan and Editor Shariar Shockett, I'm Sean Woodley. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you again next week.